Okay, so we were just finishing up the last one, and Ryan mentioned that you know, people buy things for different reasons, and you know, the mindset of them, they're all in different stages, they all have different logic on why they're doing stuff. Your own customers will buy the same products for very different reasons, and what's great is if you can actually isolate that and figure it out, you can also you can charge different prices for the same things, right? It's really crazy what like that price is off. It really should be determined by the value you're offering, that's not built into the product. It's in the consumer's mind, right? That's where the value is. This is a tool called a product hierarchy. And what it helps you do is say, hey, you know, when people are trying to pick between me and my competitors, you know, who is my readily substitutable type thing? And so in this example here, I started off with like, hey, let's go out to dinner. Okay, well, if we're breaking down dinner, you know, like it's that thought process you go through, like, well, we can either, you know, simply we can say we can go out or we can dine in. All right, well, there's okay. And if we're going to go out, hey, there's different, you know, we want like a fast food. Do you want a buffet? Do you want a sit down meal? Okay, if we go to the sit down meal, well, then there's kind of like, do we want a fancy level, maybe mid level? Maybe there's even still a lower super cheap level. Under the mid level, perhaps there's even more of like, you might then say like, maybe it's Italian, you know, we're thinking through that process of, oh, is it Italian? And then there'd be some, but in this one here, we just said, oh, for me at the time, you're going to laugh. I did this in my undergrad back in like 98 or so. So that's how old I've had these things. Maybe actually not Uncle Julio. I think I added that recently, but I initially did this thing. This is where I learned it in my undergrad. This is who would be my readily substitutables, right? So this is how I can understand in this example for me, who it is I'm considering against, because, and I want to get to a little bit later on, but your unique selling proposition, right? You want to be delivering on something that's unique, something that you actually deliver on, and something that's important to your customers, right? And it's really important, and that's where I'm a huge, if you have not read, this is the one, have you read Positioning from Reese and Trout? It's by far my favorite marketing book. It is insanely, I've read almost everything from them, and it's probably like 25 books. Well, I mean, they separated, I don't know, 20 years ago, but I've read both from Jack Trout and Al Reese, then Al Reese with his daughter, Laura Reese, who I mentioned earlier in another book. Brilliant. I love their stuff. Simple, easy to read. But positioning is so critical, and the vast, even large businesses they don't do it. They don't understand it. They don't understand the concepts. But this I loved was it's just a tool, right? You can look at it and say, oh, here, if I'm trying to figure out who am I really competing against. So a little background, when I was, I have a master's in market research, right? So I did this in Georgia. And when we were talking about, we had a group project for our class, and it was on barbecue pork. And it was interesting because we were talking about, well, we had a local business that wanted some help in their marketing. And so we were talking about it. We're like, well, who is the competition? And it was really interesting because we're like, well, is it a barbecue place? Is it other things in the grocery store? You know, what really is competition? And what is it called? A Sloppy Joe? I can make fun of myself. Is that a real competing? And I'm like, you know, I don't know. We need to do some research with customers, because what do they really consider if they're doing like a barbecue pork sandwich? What else would they have considered? And it's really, really helpful, can be helpful to understand what's going through the minds, you know, what are they looking for? And it helps you understand how you differentiate your products.
And equally, I think with this, when you kind of define the drivers for this audience, so for example, this mid-level audience, if one of these restaurants is competing in the wrong category, they may find themselves, so they think they're competing in one category, but they're not, because their menu is wrong or their pricing is wrong, then that can have quite detrimental effects on them.
Oh, man. Yep.
So it's really important that you understand your customer, the customer motivation, and who your competitors are, and make sure you identify and I will touch on it further in more detail later, your unique selling point, what differentiates you from your competitors.
Yeah. So I want to actually go back to earlier. I think you mentioned it, but Dan Kennedy, one of his big things is look, you know, find ways to, when you are marketing and advertising, show up where none of your competitors are, right? Show up differently and with a strong value proposition. So one of his customers was, I think it's Fats. What was it? The name of the guy's name was something, Matt Fats, I think, but he had a grocery store, but it was like frozen food, but as a meal. And so what he did was he wanted to advertise in the yellow pages in the restaurant area, because no other frozen foods were actually selling their food in the restaurant area, right, as a meal. So, and here's the thing what I thought you'd love about this, right, is you think out of the box so much like me. You come up with, we get really fired up in our discussions of different ways to go do stuff. They went to the yellow pages, they tried to create an ad, and the yellow pages said, you're not a restaurant, you can't advertise here. So what they do, they went and created a business that was like whatever restaurants, and they just faked it basically. And he said that he stayed in there for like 3 years. They were able to advertise in this area where no one else was. And it was just like, wow, it was such a great way to get, here's people that are out wanting, they want to buy food, they want to eat, and yet no other frozen food was there. So they were the only one. And it was just a cool, interesting way where they thought differently, allowed them to get in here and be unique in this area. Because the worst thing, that's one thing, for a while I was considering creating products and selling on Amazon, because it's amazing the insights you can see about your competitors and their pricing and their labeling and all that they're doing. The problem is, the reason why I decided not to do it is, no matter what you do, they can easily competitive shop and see what everyone else is doing. And so it just becomes a price war, right? It's really hard to differentiate on price on Amazon.
Yes, yes, agree. You don't want to have if you can avoid it, you don't want to have a commoditized business, because it's the race to the bottom.
Yep. Okay. So this was the product hierarchy. Another one I wanted to go through, and let me actually, well, whatever. I'll just jump to, I'm trying to figure out where, I think this is so I mentioned earlier, I think a little about extensive problem solving, routine problem solving, limited problem solving, extensive problem solving. What we're looking at here is an information matrix. And in this, I was using an example of my dad, and he was going to buy a laptop. So he knows nothing about different attributes of a laptop. He has no idea. He doesn't understand the importance weights. He doesn't understand the performance of competition, right? He doesn't know who's out there. So this is all blank. For me, this would be me in a laptop. This was several years ago. Maybe, I hope I've leveled up a little bit more, but I understand most of the attributes, and I understand the importance weights. I know how to evaluate them. What I don't know off the top of my head is the competitors are out there and how they score on them. I might have some, but not all. And then basically, like an IT professional, that this is what they do day in, day out, they know all of this stuff, right? The chances are they're not going to do any sort of research. It's just routine, right? They go through, they've already worked this all out in their heads. It's very clear to them. By the way, just as a side note, what's cool about this is you can take the importance weights. I think it's called the fishbind model. You multiply each of these by the episode. For Dell, it'd be 9 times 10 plus 1 times 8 plus 4 times 4, and that becomes Dell's score. And then Gateway, you do 6 times 10 plus 8 times 8 plus 6 times 4, right? And it allows you to have a weighted average of how you're doing compared to your competition. It takes into account the different weights of importance, right? So that way it just helps you do a better job to compare how you're doing compared to your competition. But anyway,
sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
I think the other really interesting thing, if you refer back to one of our earlier videos when we were talking about value and targeting different audiences, the value that you can offer your father or yourself is greater than you can offer the IT professional, because the IT professional knows it all. So the importance of a trusted source, someone who has authority and legitimacy, who they can rely upon, is much greater for your father and yourself than an IT professional who has the confidence to make an informed decision.
Yeah, that was actually, so that's a great point. Here we can see the openness to brand positioning in extensive problem solving. It's really, really large, right? In routine, it's very small. The role of brand here, no one really knows it. So the actual role of brand does nothing. In this one, it's really large because people go, oh, TI, I know that, or Dell, I know that, right? It's used as a basically hook in your head. But I think you nailed it, Ryan. And a really critical point is it's the trust, right? You can go out, and if you can find people that are in this extensive problem solving, you create stuff to educate them overall. And over time, you're doing two things, right? One is you're building in their minds that you're an expert in this area, right? Because clearly you're explaining it to them. They're like, wow, this guy knows what he's talking about. Oh, look, he actually also sells it, right? So they're, you're building trust. They believe you, but they're also at the same time getting positioned in their mind as an expert, right? So on two levels, it's really great stuff. This is where I don't think enough companies consider putting things out there and understanding. This is one of the things I tried to stress at TI. Look, for new engineers, let's do stuff to help educate them of how to evaluate these things, right? And it's very different. Someone's been engineers for 20 years, they don't want to read that crap, right? They know it.
I think this is where we can connect the dots very well. So let's imagine that historically you're a computer reseller, okay? And you think that your audience is people who want to buy a laptop, okay? It's a big audience.
Yep.
But and let's say you don't have the best product range. You're not a supplier of the premier, the best products. You've got a mid-range products. You don't have the best range. You don't have the best product. And it's going through this matrix you just laid out. It's unlikely that the IT professional would buy from you because you don't have the best product. They know the best product. They know you don't have it. But you can add a lot more value to the people who do not understand, because they're looking for someone who can add value and improve their understanding, and who's going to give them the time of day. So if you target that group, their propensity to buy from you, because you've created that trust, you've built that link, you've helped level them up so they now understand more about it and they can feel more confident about purchasing. That's the audience that's most likely to purchase from you, because a part of the audience, the IT professional, won't, because they already know that your service is not the best, that your product range, but your service can be tailored to those entry-level people without the knowledge. And this is why understanding the buyer personas, or the habitual characteristics of different parts of the market, is very important, because you would be silly to target the IT professionals because they're never going to buy from you.
Right.
So you have to focus your market.
Yeah. One thing I'm going to add to that, Ryan, is not only can you present the way you did, but look, you can actually, at this stage, in the EPS stage, you can actually affect the importance weights. You can stress, hey, this is more important than that, and that's why we're the best, right? And they're open to this because you're the only knowledge they have, right? So I don't want to say you want to go out and lie about it, but it's just you can put more emphasis on certain areas, right? Versus you're absolutely right in the routine problem solving. The experts know all these things. They actually would really get turned off if you try to tell them something's more important than they think it is.
Well, again, to the entry-level user, they might put a higher importance on after-sale service, for example.
Absolutely, right.
Professional who already understands it. So you can, again, it's about understanding the characteristics of your audience, so you can emphasize why you are superior or your unique selling point versus your competitor.
So I don't have it in front of me, but years ago when I did this this information matrix, I did exactly what you said, where I broke it down, different people inside them. That's where we're doing segmentation, right? And different people inside these things. This is the overall importance weights, but maybe there are subsegments where they value this more than that, right? And that's where, hey, you can look at this and go, wow, you know what? There's a group out here who really think this is important. And more importantly, back with the positioning, no competitors currently own that space. What if we, like, let's do the Volvo example, right? What if we focus on safety and try to take over safety? And man, they nailed it and have been really successful for years just on the whole boxing and safety, until lately, years and years later, other companies realized, like, safety is important. Okay, we're going to try to convince people we're as safe as Volvo.
Right. And then safety may be, when you start to look at that just as an example, it may be that that's a particular demographic. So it's a particular age group or a profile, people with young children or older people. So you can start to see you've gone from being all car buyers in America to a subset. And the more precisely you can target your audience, remember from our earlier session, you're going to save money in reaching those people, and you're going to have more success because you can communicate according to what they see as value much more effectively. So it's win-win if you have this mentality.
Yeah, I'm going to try to remember to use that example of safety when we get back to where we had originally started, the targeting, because I think it's a spot on. Like, there are, we find there are core demographic, psychographic, corporographic things that are different about people who value certain things, right? But let me briefly go through. So this was the EPS one. It's been on the screen long enough, people can read it. Limited problem solving has, again, they don't know what this is all filled in. They're much more interested in at this point, you can't necessarily change the importance weights, but you can still talk through about the performance and compared by the competitors. And the routine problem solving, this is again where they know it all. Often, I think this is where we talk about price and availability become key, and it can really drive everything, right? This is where the big corporate America, I think, has it right, of just keeping their name out there and brand awareness type thing, right? That's what they do to keep them in the top of mind. That's all you have to do. You're not trying to position yourself. It's already, everything's positioned, so you don't focus on that.
Yeah, if you're a challenger, you're more likely to want to obviously you compete on price, but also service or things like that can help differentiate you from the people with the large enterprise.
Yeah, in positioning, they talk a lot about it. They talk about it's a ladder in people's heads, right, of the competition. And if you're really a challenger and a new guy, often you're better to position yourself in the mind, something that's already in the mind of consumers. So 7-Up was the anti-cola, right? They positioned themselves as a not cola because people knew what a cola was, right? So they actually said, hey, we're not that. And that helped people understand in a very quick instant, like, oh, okay, I get it. It's still a soda. It's just not a cola. Okay, I understand what it is. And it's a great way, leverage something that's already in their minds. And also most copywriting, it's one of the best things you could say is, enter the conversation they're already having in their mind, right? Write your copy, write your talking points to something they're already thinking about, and that helps you back to the relevant, right? Relevance.
Yeah, just on that point, and I might as well bring it up now. If you are a business who's making proposals for people, and it's maybe you're a B2B type company, one of the techniques which can be very powerful is to use their language. Because if the company, for example, if you review their website or their marketing materials, if you mimic back their language, so you frame everything in language that they understand, their phraseology, you will instantly feel more empathetic to them. They will feel like you understand them better simply because you are using their language. So you frame things in the way that you frame them. I had a very large SaaS company come and visit me once to try to sell me their product. And we were going to do quite a large deal with them, but they kept talking about the clients, not the customer. And our particular company referred to our clients as clients. And they were at pains to tell me how they knew our business inside out. But on this very fundamental level, they didn't realize we had clients, not customers. It may sound trivial, but it just underlined to me that they didn't actually understand our business at all. Yeah. And so it's really important if you have a B2B business, try to use language or frame things in a way that the customer will understand.
Yeah, I can give you a great example of that at TI. And this is because, I'm not an engineer, right? And I started there, and boy, it took me a while to get to know just on concept understanding stuff. But they have a whole division called high performance analog. And so it's one of the ways they segment their website is high performance analysis. And it was only after doing focus groups with engineers where we talk about, now explain, what you like about they're like, what is high performance analog? I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, that doesn't mean anything to me. I don't know what that is. And I'm like, oh my God, that's an internal TI term. It's not something the customers use. And it was like a holy cow, right? Wow. I'm like, what would you use? And I forget what they said, but it was a really good, man, like you said, but a lot of customers in general, they're kind of used to it. So it off-puts you, but it doesn't disqualify. Yet if you do nail it, you're in like Flynn, right? You're much more likely to say, these people know me. They know what I want. It's tailored. Yeah.
And it's not just about your proposal. That should be like that in your language and conversation with them. Use their terms, use their phraseology. So you just have instant empathy and you're breaking down a barrier. And whatever you do, if you're a company with your own 3-letter acronyms, don't use those because you're building walls. You're having the company have to ask you what on earth you're talking about.
Right.
And there are companies like, say, for example, Procter & Gamble, perhaps Unilever to a degree, have their own huge lexicon.
Yeah.
If you're talking to them, if you're lucky enough to have them as a prospect, talk to them in their language.
Yeah, right.
But
Right.
try to make sure that everything is in context and framed in the way that the customer will find it easy to understand. Whether they're a small customer or a big customer, make sure you're communicating relevant, timely, and appropriate information.
Well, actually, I'm going to add one more onto it. Is in the EPS stage, extensive problem solving, you can actually go out and create the what do you call them? The abbreviations, acronym sheet to help newbies understand the vocabulary, right? You're educating them on concepts they should understand about the industry, not necessarily yours, right? But it's the industry, and you become like this. Oh, hey, it's on their website. Like they're the experts, right? It's one of the key things you can put together to help them understand, and again, help educate them how to make an informed decision. Don't push hard for your business at that point, right? It will come because in their mind you are the expert. Don't be, no one wants to hear you saying how great you are, right? It's do it the opposite. Okay, so we're continuing on here. Here are some other implications dealing with RPS and LPS stuff. Non-leaders, it's what was it? Non-leaders, the RPS consideration set for those not in. Yeah, you can. What your goal is to, if you're a new guy and there are people out there, there's other competitors out there already in your area, your goal is to somehow get consumers to suddenly reconsider their thought process, right? And I'm not saying this is, how you do it is going to be very specific on what your industry is and what's going on, but that's what you should be trying to do, right? Is to get people to reevaluate. You got to really come up with a new thing, because no one, if again, they're in routine problem solving. They're not searching for information. How do you get people, or do you just say, look, there are always people at different stages, no matter what, just because as people age, right, they come into an industry, they are in an extensive problem solving. And we're just going to try to bring in the new guys, right, and own them. If you try to go out and keep the current market, it's just a whole different tactic, right, what you want to do about that. Both in RPS and LPS, changing importance or performance weights is really difficult. So you got to be try to motivate them. In here now, I have an article. I'll give you a link to it later. From Rossiter-Percy. This I've reread this article probably a dozen times. I mean, I've had it forever. Again, this was from my undergrad, but it talks about they break it down into 8 typical emotions where you can get people to motivated to try stuff. Or in their psychology, and there's informational and transformational is an overall thing. If you notice here, it's interesting. A lot of the motives here are negative, right? Problem removal, problem avoidance, incomplete satisfaction. Normal depletion is not negative, and I think mixed approach avoidance, that's a slightly negative. But and here just an example of what you're doing with it. And then when it's transformational, it's much, it's a different approach and mindset. And this, they cover in their article, they create a grid and talk about the different involvement and different, this information are transformational and where your business or your products might be. So it's a really good thing to read through. I've reread it over and over because every time I read it again, I have a deeper learning of like, wow, things are clicking and it makes sense. The next slide, I think, is talking about that involvement, and just a very careful thing of when you're creating your advertising and marketing, things that you can just, again, helping you understand and think about how others might be viewing it is critical in what you're saying to them. So number 2, right, obviously, make sure that the target audience is going to accept the ad's main points, right? Don't do stuff that they're not going to even believe.
You have to be credible. I think that you can't be incredible. Right. I mean, you can be outrageous, I suppose, but you can't be incredible. You have, because you're trying to build that trust. And if you're talking absolute nonsense, you're not going to have cut through.
Yeah. And several of these are kind of like don't overclaim, but also don't underclaim. Don't be afraid to make statements. And that's a big one I've read in a lot of Kennedy's stuff as well. And Joseph Sugarman too talks about, when you give, when you mention stuff, be specific, right? We are 3.78 times more efficient or whatever. And when you be specific like that, it builds this level of trust. Like there's actually some metrics behind this because you're being so specific.
Right. You're trying to be credible. I think that the context I would give on this, or an example, an analogy would be with CVs, resumes. When people apply for jobs, one candidate A may walk in and say, I have worked for a big company, and they may have worked with a local hamburger joint. And candidate B may come in and say, I worked for a big company, and they say, I've worked as the regional CEO for McDonald's. So context again is really important here. That if you can anchor your claims in some tangible statistical validation, that's going to really enhance the value of your message.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, I think we've wrapped up this one pretty well.